There is a sad, under-discussed aspect to crypto ecosystems. It's that they have to abide by some of the same rules as biological ecosystems. The most unfortunate of which might be that sometimes survival of the fittest means only survival of the most adaptable. You may be the strongest, fittest mammal in the forest, but if there's an ice age coming, you might die out in lieu of another species that can better digest the plants that will still grow in that colder climate. We are currently in our own crypto mini ice age. We're going to see a lot of our favorite projects in Cardano die, get severely scaled back, and slowly fade into irrelevance, just like every other blockchain ecosystem. This isn't sad. It's just the ecosystem sorting out the fittest ideas and renewing itself through evolution. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss the Rogue Galaxies announcement, some big rumors about Ethereum projects getting notices from the SEC, an interesting idea for the Cardano Summit this year, the CEO of OpenAI with a provocative prediction, and Charles starting a new series of AMAs with a recurring guest. If the first thing you think when you see this image is that it's super sad that no one got to eat all that delicious steak, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. It sounds like the scaling back and or dying season in crypto is still in full swing, and it's reaching us even in Cardano with the latest event in that season, at least in Cardano, relating to Rogue Galaxies. So this was a project I was really excited for because it was going to add another virtual world slash metaverse slash game to the Cardano ecosystem. In this case, it was more on the game side. It seemed like it was going to be this really ambitious sci-fi roguelike MMO. And they had a lot of cool storytelling, it sounded like they wanted to do, but things haven't quite worked out as planned. So they were going to build sort of three modules: space exploration, planet expeditions, and a social hub. And they were going to fund this in three ways: a not insignificant initial investment. The majority of the funding was going to come from NFT sales. And then at a later stage, once they'd proven the concept, create a large community, they were planning for seed investors. But the NFT sales apparently have not gone as planned. They say once we started with the first NFT sell, it quickly became clear that we won't be able to sell as many NFTs as we planned. So they decided to focus on building out the Fleet Commander Rogue Galaxies game, a story-focused web game that would allow them to deliver something to the community. And they did some work on making the NFTs more visually differentiable. But they say now on this, they say, but unfortunately, it was not enough to sell a significant amount of NFTs in the next drops. We sold less than 150 NFTs, which would not even fully cover our fixed costs. We've clearly failed. We failed to live up to your expectations, and we failed to live up to our own expectations. With basically no money left, it is now clear there's currently no way for us to fulfill the initial vision of Rogue Galaxies. So this is a part of crypto. Projects kind of putting their vision out to the world, trying to raise funds. Sometimes they're going to be able to raise enough funds to, attack their vision, to attack, fulfilling their vision, and sometimes they're not. And this is kind of just, that whole evolution thing. In this case, part of it, I'm sure, is the adaptation thing. We've moved from this bull cycle crypto environment where NFTs sold like crazy. Now we're in a crypto winter, and people have a much lower appetite for new projects in general and NFTs and everything. And you're going to have projects that, their initial plan, if it was conceived, at an earlier time, it might still work when we have this shift into, this deep crypto winter, this crypto bear cycle. Some projects, maybe it's just the timing thing. Some projects may have raised funds during the crypto bull cycle, and they've still got enough money to make it through crypto winter. Others might, have tried to raise funds as we sort of shifted into crypto winter, and they just couldn't raise enough. Some projects will run out of funds even though they raised at the right time. There are so many ways to fail in crypto, and this is just all a part of crypto. The best ideas, should we launch a project at this time versus, time A versus time B on the timeline? Nobody necessarily knows what the markets are going to do, what the market has an appetite for. Everybody's just sort of making their best calculated guess. And some of these ideas are going to turn out to be the right ideas. And, the evolution of crypto is going to sift out other ideas, even if the only bad thing about the idea was the timing, So there are a lot of ways that projects are going to fail, but this is all going to be part of our evolution as a Cardano ecosystem. We're going to have a lot of projects fail. And some of the projects that fail might be, projects we really like. Some of the projects that succeed might be projects that no one would have ever guessed would succeed. But this is how the evolution of our Cardano ecosystem is going to work. We're going to have projects failing and dying and scaling back. And we're going to have the resurgence of projects maybe that scaled back at the right time. I think of the Sequoia Capital Rest in Peace Good Times memo. If you've never read that, you can Google it and find it. They talk a lot about scaling back at the right time when sort of economic conditions change. And this isn't even in the context of crypto. This is just in the context of normal sort of macro changes. So we're going to see a lot of this, and it's not necessarily a sad thing. It's certainly sad for the project involved, the project team involved, and the people who have, invested into a project, but especially with games and metaverses. This is why I've always been telling people, don't think of these things as investments. These are very expensive game pieces to a game that you don't know if it'll ever exist. It's a very expensive game piece to a game that may never even exist. So when you this is not financial or investment advice to anyone, but I would say for myself, if I buy something related to one of these virtual worlds, games, metaverses, this whole genre of projects, I pretty much kiss that money goodbye as if I'm going to some kind of a game store and buying a game. It's a consumptive activity. I'm hoping to be able to consume this game piece, but it's certainly not an investment of any type. I'm buying the possibility of future utility in a game that may or may not exist. And we're going to see a lot of projects like this. This is obviously sort of a scaling back we're seeing here, but we're going to see a lot of projects, just come right out and say, hey, we've died. We've run out of money and there are no investors to give us more money. The market doesn't have an appetite to purchase any more NFTs. Our project has died. We're going to see that also. This project, it sounds like it's just more of a scaling back, but we're also going to see the outright deaths of projects. So for myself, at least, I don't think of any of these projects as any kind of investment. I think of these game, virtual world, metaverse projects as, I think the things they're selling, I think of them as game pieces that I'm going to buy. And if I'm lucky, fingers crossed, I actually get to consume that game piece, use it, and the utility to me will be fun. But man, you cannot think of these as investments in any way. I think it's too easy, especially in crypto, for these projects to fail, scale back, and not end up being what you hoped they were going to be. So Rogue Galaxies specifically, they say, and none of that was necessarily directed at Rogue Galaxies. I'm just saying in general, that's how I think of these projects. It's like I'm buying a game piece to use in a video game, which may or may not exist down the road. So Rogue Galaxy says, what now? So we sat down and thought long and hard about how we can pivot the scope of the project to keep it alive. What we've decided on is the following. They'll use the next months to expand Rogue Galaxy's Fleet Commander into a standalone game. We have halted all NFT sales. We'll not take any more money from the community. Instead, we'll be taking responsibility and putting in more of our own money to fund this Rogue Galaxy's Fleet Commander expansion. I think that sounds pretty good. I mean, there are not a lot of projects, I think, in this situation would just go out and try to sell more NFTs like crazy. They'd have this wide variety of NFTs they're trying to sell to their community. These guys are saying they're halting all NFT sales, will not take any more money from the community, instead putting in more of their own money. They say the development of the modules will be put on hold to focus on the Fleet Commander expansion. Our community building efforts will be decreased to be able to focus our time on delivering the Fleet Commander expansion. After the release of that expansion, it will not be possible for us to work full-time on the project anymore. We will do our best efforts to keep the IP and the community alive. We have spoken to some seed investors already, and we'll continue the talks. If we can find an investor, if the overall crypto market situation gets better, we might revive the original vision. To close it off, we would like to thank all of you. So this is one of those cases where things didn't quite line up. The financing of the project didn't quite match the burn that was going to be entailed in achieving that original very ambitious vision. This is in 2023. I think we might see a lot of this in Cardano, not just in games and metaverses and virtual worlds. We might see this. I think we are going to see this throughout the ecosystem, just like the rest of crypto. This is crypto winter. This is what happens in crypto winter. This is sad for the individual projects, but this is sort of a necessary part of that evolution as an ecosystem. We've got to go through this crypto winter, and crypto winter, the evolution part, is going to sort out the ideas that can adapt to changing circumstances, the ideas that were well timed, the ideas that are, good ideas versus other ideas. It's gonna sift out. It's gonna sift out a lot of ideas that may have just gotten one tiny thing wrong. And sometimes it'll just be timing, but we can't be sad about this or get too think about this too much as a reflection on the whole ecosystem. It's just the ecosystem evolving and sort of sorting out the good ideas and the well-timed ideas and all of those little factors. So there were some very interesting rumors floating around this weekend. Like with many crypto rumors, a good portion of which turned out not to be true. So there was this report on a very prominent sort of Ethereum-oriented podcast where they said that basically there was a carpet. I mean, they did say they were rumors, but they said they were sort of getting these. They were hearing these rumors. There was basically a carpet bombing of DeFi projects, Ethereum and potentially other DeFi projects maybe, that had received Wells notices from the SEC. So a Wells notice is when the SEC has completed an investigation. It's when they've completed an investigation. It's sort of like their last step before they sue the project. It's sort of like a chance for the project to respond and say, hey, no, don't sue us for the following reasons. But it's at the end of usually a very lengthy investigation where the SEC has basically already come to their own conclusions. So when they talked about this rumor, and they did say it was a rumor, when they talked about it, they said possibly even Lido got one of these notices. So when I first heard this rumor, this was unsurprising to me, of course, because Lido, I mean, they've been calling it a staking derivative instrument, this whole time, a staking derivative. And one of the things we know is that federal regulators get to regulate things like derivatives, and the SEC would certainly be all over that. So it turned out, though, even as plausible as these rumors were, it turned out that they weren't quite as true as people initially thought they were. So here's the clarification from the same person on that podcast who, was sort of proliferating those rumors. So he says, update on the Wells Notice carpet bombing statements. I checked with my source and have some clarifications. He says, timing and concentration was wrong. He had said that many Wells notices had been distributed in the last week or so. He now says the week part is incorrect. That time frame is incorrectly concentrated. While there is at least one confirmed Wells notice that has gone out recently that isn't known to the public, the idea of a mass recent carpet bomb isn't correct. So it sounds like he probably knows who actually did get a Wells notice, or at least that some very well-known project did get one and hasn't disclosed that to public. I think there are probably some Wells notices out there that haven't been disclosed, because what we've seen in the past is that a project will have gotten one and then they don't announce it for some time while they're sort of, strategizing. They're coming up with some kind of a strategy to deal with it. And it seems like they take a second before they disclose that to their community or sort of the crypto ecosystem in general. I would guess that there are probably some Wells notices out there right now, to some significant projects that we just don't know about because they're still trying to figure out what they're going to do about it. So Apparently, he says, my source did say that the idea of a Wells Notice carpet bomb was generally on target. The concentration of time as a recent thing was a miscommunication. He also said there have apparently been rumors of Lido being caught in the crosshairs of Gary Gensler. Members of the Lido team have reached out to me and said that this is false. He says, I regret naming Lido specifically since this whole thing is all rumors and Lido doesn't deserve to be focused on specifically here. One of the things I would point out is that there's a difference between a Wells notice, which sort of marks the end of an SEC investigation, and subpoenas from the SEC, which could happen at any time during an investigation, especially at the beginning. So it's possible there's some conflation here, just generally in the sort of Ethereum world. And it could be that some projects have gotten some subpoenas from the SEC where the SEC hits them up for information. They say, hey, send us the following information. We want to know about the following. And you kind of have to comply with those. If you're a crypto project based, somewhere where the SEC can reach you, it could be that some of those have gone out too. And when these projects are being asked, hey, we heard there's a rumor going around, you got a Wells notice. It could be that they actually got a subpoena of some kind from the SEC, but they get asked, did you receive a Wells notice? And they say, no, we have not received a Wells notice, which would, technically be accurate, but doesn't really tell the whole story. I think there's probably a lot more activity going on between federal regulators and some of these projects. There's probably a lot more activity like that going on that we don't know about. A lot of the big exchanges, the centralized exchanges, are sort of constantly dealing with federal regulators as part of their, sort of anti-money laundering, OFAC kind of duties. They're probably coordinating with federal regulators all the time. But here we're talking specifically about federal regulators investigating these projects themselves and not just coordinating with the projects about their customers. Here's something that sounds pretty good to me. People have been broaching the idea, what if FutureFest held the Cardano Summit in 2023? We always end up having these sort of like virtual worlds for the Cardano Summit because most people are going to attend virtually, not in person. And people have been broaching this idea. What if FutureFest held it? They're great at holding events like this. They're very good. And all of a sudden, instead of sort of, a slightly sterile environment for the Cardano Summit, what if the Cardano Summit virtual world was a big party held by FutureFest? And every night they had a little FutureFest, concert event. I think this is a pretty good idea. The CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman, recently gave an interesting interview to Forbes, and there's a quote from that interview that's getting a lot of exposure. You probably know OpenAI from their products like ChatGPT and DALL-E. They've been getting a lot of exposure lately. So in this Forbes article, this is actually an article covering that interview on futurism.com. But in that Forbes interview, he had these quotes. I think capitalism is awesome. I love capitalism. Of all the bad systems the world has, it's the best one, or the least bad one we found so far. I hope we find a way better one. I think that if AGI really, truly, fully happens, I can imagine all these ways that it breaks capitalism. I think this is a very distinct possibility. I think this is one of those things, even if you think it sounds absurd, you can't really cross this off the list of possibilities. This kind of has to be on your radar. I actually am much more, I don't want to use the word optimistic. Maybe I should say pessimistic about this. I'm optimistic that he is correct, but I'm pessimistic about that, that actually occurring. I think it's probably, I don't know if it's good if we break capitalism, since I think he's right. It's the best system we've found. It's the only one that seems to work very well, at least, degrees of capitalism. I think we have various degrees of capitalism that are working very well across the world. And we've seen various types of other systems fail dramatically, leading to the deaths of millions of people in some cases through famine and poor economic planning, all those kinds of things. So this is a little bit scary. But I think if we're just asking the question, could, real artificial general intelligence, so we're talking about real AGI, which is something far beyond what, ChatGPT brings us as a language learning, system. and what generative art like DALL-E brings us. These kinds of sort of nascent artificial intelligence are not AGI. He's talking about full-blown artificial general intelligence. I think he's right. I think maybe it does break capitalism, because capitalism is based on competition. And if we truly had AGI with this sort of like what to us might seem like infinite wisdom, infinite knowledge, infinite ability to predict, sort of like the best inputs to get the best outputs, how do you even have competition if everyone could just go to the artificial general intelligence and get the best strategy? It seems like everyone would just copy that strategy. Sure, you could have competing AGI, but if it's truly AGI and everybody's using AGI, you're going to get these infinitely wise strategies. What inputs should I use to get the desired outputs? I think he's right. I think what we think of as capitalism does get broken, and we probably have to think about economics in general as a completely different thing. I think Elon Musk has sort of echoed this kind of point, saying that he doesn't even know if we know what economics means, what an economy means, if you have things like robots and artificial intelligence. So something scary just to keep on your radar. This weekend, we also saw the advent of a brand new type of AMA from Charles and IO. This was the Chaz and Gingersnaps AMA. So the Chaz part is Charles. The Gingersnaps part is Tamara Hassan, president of IO. So this was kind of interesting. I mean, in the past, we've heard from various people inside IO on the Cardano 360s. But usually they're sort of like on the kind of the engineering side of IO. We kind of hear from the people who are involved in the actual development projects. So it was really interesting to hear from the president of IO. First of all, she seems to be a very capable, level-headed business person. Definitely, I think for a lot of people, it's probably, even raised their confidence in IO, because she definitely seems to be a no-nonsense kind of person who knows what she's doing. We also learned she's an ex-hockey player. So she used to play hockey, and apparently her style of hockey play was particularly aggressive. Charles kind of jokingly characterized this as her having gotten kicked out of hockey because she was too aggressive. She said she just had an appreciation for body checks as a part of hockey, which I found to be very entertaining. When you look at her LinkedIn, it's also something interesting. Maybe everybody already knew about this, but this was kind of news to me. When I look at her LinkedIn, a certain section of her LinkedIn seems to indicate that she has been in a few movies and was also on the TV show Friday Night Lights, which was kind of a surprise to me because that was a very popular TV show. And I would think that I would have heard that fact already. Maybe everybody already knew this. Maybe I'm the only one who didn't know this, but her LinkedIn seems to indicate that. And when I look on IMDb, it seems to confirm that. It looks like she used a screen name. You know how the whole SAG thing works. If somebody is already using your name or something like your name, people will often, use their middle name. It looks like something like that's going on with her. So it's a slightly different name. But then I saw something else that said that that was the same person. So apparently, she is not just she's not just a former hockey player who was pretty aggressive in hockey, but she was also in a few movies and also on Friday Night Lights, which are interesting facts. But if you listen to the AMA, I think you'd be convinced that she seems to be a very level-headed person and a very capable business person who seems to have sort of a holistic view of IO's work and sort of the development of the ecosystem. This was entertaining. I hope they have a whole bunch more about this and we can hear more from the president of IO. She has sort of a unique perspective that we don't get to hear very often. But in any case, I hope you had a great weekend, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.